On the last night of the year, Rochelle had to make one final delivery through winter's teeth. She checked the address with exhausted eyes. This had to be it. The house stood alone, glass walls like frozen waterfalls, steel beams that caught no festive light, no warmth in sight. She hesitated, her 6-year-old son Peter beside her. Then she knocked on the one door that should have stayed closed. And that was the moment everything divided, because the man who opened it wasn't expecting guests. He was Victor Langford, the billionaire whose silence controlled empires and whose fortress had been breached for the first time in years. And Rochelle had no idea the crimson-wrapped gift in her hands wasn't a present. It was a declaration of war. This is the story of how one wrong address turned a Jamaican single mother into the center of a silent battle and awakened something in the most isolated man in the city. This story starts with a knock on the wrong door. But first, subscribe and tell me in the comments, have you ever made a mistake that changed everything? Because that's exactly what's about to happen here. Let's begin. Father, Chapter 1. Snow spiraled past the glass monolith rising from the frozen riverfront like a blade of crystal against the night sky. Rochelle tightened her scarf, the wool scratchy against her raw throat, and shifted the crimson-wrapped box to her other hip. Her breath ghosted the air in short, exhausted puffs. Behind her, the city glowed gold and distant, a world that felt warm only in memory. Beside her, 6-year-old Peter hopped from boot to boot, his small, mittened hands reaching toward the box. "Mama, is it magic inside?" His voice carried that particular brightness children save for wonder, even in the cold. "Baby, we're just delivering it, not for us." Rochelle's voice was gentle but firm, the tone of a woman who'd learned early that hope had to be measured. She glanced down at the delivery app one more time. The address glowed on her cracked phone screen. Smudged handwriting, urgent notation, cash payment confirmed. The building number matched, but something felt displaced. Wrong. This wasn't the cheerful condo she'd imagined when she accepted the job 3 hours ago. This was architecture as armor, walls of reinforced glass, steel beams that caught no reflection, a structure designed to repel rather than welcome. No holiday wreaths, no warm light bleeding through curtains. Just cold, geometric precision and the kind of silence that suggested surveillance. Rochelle's instincts screamed in a language she'd learned growing up in Kingston, then refined through years of surviving as an immigrant mother in a city that rarely noticed her. The same instinct that told her which streets to avoid, which job offers hid exploitation, which smiles masked contempt. Turn around. Walk away. Peter doesn't need to see you finish every job. But Peter did need her to finish this one. Because tomorrow was January 1st, and his school fees were due. Because their landlord had already extended grace twice. Because the extra money promised for this urgent New Year's Eve delivery was exactly the amount that stood between stability and catastrophe. Rochelle squared her shoulders. She was tired, bone deep, soul tired, but she wasn't defeated. Not yet. "Hold Mama's coat, Peter. Don't let go." Peter's small fist closed around the hem of her jacket. Together, they approached the entrance. The door was seamless glass and black steel, the kind that cost more than Rochelle earned in a year. No doorbell, no intercom, just a subtle panel that might have been a scanner. She raised her gloved hand and knocked. Once, twice, 3 times, the sound was swallowed by the snow. For a long moment, nothing, then motion. The door slid open soundlessly and warm air rushed out, carrying the scent of leather and something metallic. Expensive, controlled. The man who stood in the threshold didn't smile, didn't speak, just observed. Victor Langford. Rochelle didn't know his name yet, but she recognized power when it stood in front of her. Tall, perhaps in his early 40s, with the kind of composure that came from never needing to raise his voice. Dark suit, no tie, eyes the color of winter itself, gray and unreadable. His gaze swept over her, exhausted Jamaican woman in a second-hand coat, holding a delivery box in a child's hand. Calculating. Measuring. "Delivery," Rochelle said, her voice steadier than she felt. "For this address, paid in advance. I just need a signature." Victor's eyes moved from her face to the crimson box, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear, men like this didn't fear easily, but recognition, alert. Who sent this? His voice was quiet, precise, the kind that made you lean in to hear every word. I don't know, sir. The app just gave me the address and— What app? Rochelle fumbled with her phone, fingers clumsy in the cold. She pulled up the delivery screen, but even as she turned it toward him, she saw the interface flicker. Glitch. The job listing that had promised triple pay was fading, vanishing. Her stomach dropped. Victor stepped forward slightly, his presence filling the doorway. Behind him, Rochelle caught a glimpse of the interior. Minimalist, surveillance-grade lighting, and, her breath caught, three men in dark suits standing near what looked like security monitors. This wasn't a home. This was a command center. Mama? Peter's voice was small, uncertain. He pressed against her leg. Victor's gaze dropped to the child. Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, or calculation recalibrating. Children complicated equations, made clean solutions messy. You brought your son. It wasn't a question. It was an observation that carried weight. Yes, I couldn't leave him alone on New Year's Eve. Please, I just need to deliver this and— Where did you get this box? The question was sharper now, threaded with something Rochelle couldn't name. She clutched Peter tighter. A pickup point downtown. I was told it was urgent. I needed the money. That's all I know, I swear. Victor studied her for 3 long seconds. Then he reached out, not for the bomb, but for a device in his pocket. He pressed something, and Rochelle heard the soft click of locks engaging somewhere deep in the walls. Security protocols activating. Step inside, Victor said quietly. It wasn't a request. Rochelle's heart hammered against her ribs. Every survival instinct she'd ever honed screamed at her to run. But Peter was beside her, and her legs were weak from cold and exhaustion, and the man in front of her had the kind of authority that made refusal feel impossible. Sir, I just want to deliver this and— You can't leave. Victor's eyes never left hers. Not until I understand what this is. He gestured to one of the men inside. Zephyrin, scan it. A lean man with silver streaking his temples moved forward with a device Rochelle didn't recognize. He passed it over the crimson wrapping, and a low beep echoed in the silence. Zephyrин's expression darkened. Sir, it's tagged. Tagged. The word hung in the air like a threat. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he turned back to Rochelle, and for the first time, she saw something beneath the ice in his eyes. Danger, not directed at her, but surrounding her. You need to come inside now, he said, voice still calm but undercut with steel. You and your son, you're not safe out here. What? Why? I don't— Behind her, the night shifted. A sound. Faint, mechanical. The kind of sound that shouldn't be there. Victor moved with startling speed, his hand gripping Rochelle's elbow as he pulled her and Peter across the threshold. The door slammed shut behind them with a finality that echoed through her bones. Mama! Peter's cry was muffled against her coat. Victor released her but didn't step back. Where did you pick up this box? Exactly. Rochelle's mind spun, trying to piece together details through rising panic. A warehouse near the rail yard. 4th Street. There was a woman, older, didn't give her name, just handed me the box and the address. Zephyrin was already typing rapidly on a tablet. 4th Street pickup point was abandoned 6 months ago, sir. Someone's using dead drops. Victor's expression didn't change, but Rochelle felt the shift in the room's atmosphere, like pressure dropping before a storm. They used her. Zephyrin's voice was grim. Victor turned back to Rochelle. She was shaking now, clutching Peter against her, eyes wide with the dawning horror of understanding. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. I believe you. Victor's tone was matter-of-fact, which somehow made it worse. But whoever sent you did. You weren't chosen randomly. You were selected. Rochelle's knees went weak. Selected for what? Victor reached for the pause, and with careful precision, he sliced through the crimson paper with a blade that appeared from nowhere. Inside wasn't a gift. It was a message. A small, ornate key rested on black velvet. Beside it, a photograph, Victor's photograph, with a red line drawn across his throat. And beneath it, words typed on aged paper. Midnight brings accountability. Rochelle's vision blurred at the edges. Peter's small voice reached her through the static filling her head. Mama? What's wrong, Mama? Victor's voice cut through, calm and absolute. Where did you get this? But Rochelle couldn't answer, because she was staring at the key, at the photograph, at the promise of violence coded into crimson wrapping, and her desperate need for grocery money. She had walked into a trap, and worse, she'd brought her son with her. Victor took a step closer, his presence somehow both threatening and protective. What's your name? Rochelle, her voice cracked. We just came to deliver. I didn't. I know. His voice dropped lower. But they knew you would. Someone counted on your need, your desperation. They weaponized your survival. The words landed like blows. Behind them, an alarm began to pulse, soft, insistent. Zephyrin moved to a wall panel, his expression hardening. Sir, perimeter breach, east entrance, 3 signatures. Victor didn't flinch. He simply turned to Rochelle with eyes that had gone from ice to steel. You can't leave, he said quietly. Not because I won't let you, because they're already here. Chapter 2. The emergency lights cast crimson shadows across Victor's command center. As Rochelle sank onto the leather sofa, Peter pressed against her side. Her hands trembled as she pulled him closer, his small body warm and trusting. Too trusting. He didn't understand yet that his mother had walked them both into something that might not let them walk back out. Victor stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone pressed to his ear, his voice too low for Rochelle to hear. But she caught fragments. Full lockdown. Trace the origin. Keep them contained. Contained, like specimens, like evidence. Rochelle closed her eyes and the night rewound. Six hours earlier, the radiator in their studio apartment clanked and wheezed, barely producing heat. Rochelle had wrapped Peter in 2 sweaters and her own winter coat while she made rice and beans stretch for the 3rd night in a row. The kitchen, barely large enough to be called one, smelled of Scotch bonnet pepper and thyme, scents that carried her back to Kingston, to her grandmother's house, where the walls were painted turquoise and breadfruit trees shaded the yard. That was before she'd believed the recruiter's promises about opportunities abroad, before she'd arrived pregnant and alone to discover the teaching position didn't exist, before Peter was born in a charity hospital while she clutched a social worker's hand and wished desperately for her mother's voice. Mama, can we have chicken tomorrow? Peter had asked, looking up from his coloring book, donated like most of their possessions. Maybe, baby. We'll see. For the new year, his eyes held that dangerous thing, hope. Rochelle had swallowed the knot in her throat. I'm working tonight. Extra money. So yes, chicken for New Year. She'd learned not to make promises she couldn't keep. But Peter deserved at least one kept promise, just one. The notification had appeared on her phone at 6:47 p.m. Not from her usual delivery app, Easy Run, with its orange interface and reasonable hourly rate. This was something new. Night Shift Express, sleek, professional, promising triple the normal rate for urgent New Year's Eve deliveries. Rochelle had hesitated. She'd seen scams before, heard stories of women lured into dangerous situations with promises of easy money. But the app looked legitimate. 5-star reviews, verified payment system, even a customer service number. She'd called it. A pleasant automated voice had confirmed her registration and first assignment. Single delivery, paid in advance. $300 cash bonus upon completion. Pick up at 8 p.m. $300. Enough to cover the late rent fee. Enough for Peter's school registration. Enough to buy actual groceries instead of rationing canned soup. Rochelle had checked the pickup location. 4th Street Rail Yard. Not the safest neighborhood, but it was early enough. She could be there and back before the New Year crowds got too drunk and unpredictable. Can I come, Mama? Peter had asked, sensing her preparing to leave. She should have said no. Should have called Mrs. Chen from down the hall, the elderly woman who sometimes watched Peter for a few dollars. But Mrs. Chen had family visiting for the holiday. And the thought of leaving Peter alone on New Year's Eve, even for a few hours, made Rochelle's chest tight with an anxiety she couldn't name. You can come, but you have to stay close, okay? No wandering. Peter had nodded solemnly, his 6-year-old face suddenly serious. I'll protect you, Mama. The words had broken her heart a little. He shouldn't need to think about protection. He should think about toys and cartoons, and whether snow tasted like coconut ice. The rail yard had been exactly as ominous as Rochelle expected. Chain-link fences, graffiti-tagged warehouses, the kind of emptiness that suggested people had learned to avoid this place after dark. She'd almost turned back 3 times. But then she'd seen her, an older woman, perhaps 60, wrapped in an expensive wool coat that seemed out of place against the industrial decay. She'd been standing beside a black sedan, a crimson-wrapped box in her gloved hands. Rochelle Martin? The woman had asked, her accent hard to place. European, maybe. Refined. Yes, ma'am. Your delivery. The woman had handed over the box with both hands, like it was precious or fragile. The address is on the label, urgent, must arrive before midnight. Rochelle had taken the box lighter than she expected. Is there a name, someone I should ask for? The address is sufficient. The woman's smile hadn't reached her eyes. He'll know what it means. Before Rochelle could ask anything else, the woman had slipped into the sedan. The car had pulled away, taillights disappearing into the industrial darkness, leaving Rochelle standing in the cold with a box and a feeling she couldn't shake. Peter had tugged her coat. Mama? The lady forgot to say Happy New Year. Some people don't celebrate, baby. But it wasn't that. Rochelle knew it even then. The woman hadn't forgotten. She simply didn't care about pleasantries. Because whatever was in this box wasn't about celebration. Rochelle had checked the app again. The delivery address glowed on her screen. A riverfront location. High-end area. The kind of neighborhood where buildings had doormen and security cameras. Safe enough, she told herself. Rich people ordering last-minute gifts. Nothing strange about that. Except everything was strange about it. The app interface had felt wrong somehow. Too smooth. Too polished. Like something designed specifically to inspire trust. No customer reviews for this particular delivery. No contact information for the sender. Just the address and a timer counting down to midnight. Rochelle had almost deleted the app right there. Almost called the whole thing off. But then she'd felt Peter's mittened hand slip into hers, and she'd thought about the eviction notice tucked in her purse. The school fees due January 2nd. The way the grocery store clerk had looked at her yesterday when her card declined. She'd made her choice. Not recklessly, not carelessly, but desperately. The way people made choices when every option was bad, but some were survivable, present. Mama, Rochelle opened her eyes. Peter was looking up at her, his face creased with worry that no 6-year-old should know how to express. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Across the room, Victor ended his call and turned. His gaze found Rochelle immediately, and she saw something in his expression that made her stomach clench. Not anger, not even accusation, assessment. He was deciding something, calculating. And Rochelle understood with sudden, terrible clarity that her life, Peter's life, hung on whatever conclusion he reached. Victor crossed the room with measured steps, each one deliberate. He didn't sit, didn't try to make himself less intimidating. He simply stood, looking down at her with those winter gray eyes, and spoke. Tell me everything about tonight, from the beginning, every detail you remember. Again. It wasn't a request, so Rochelle told him. The app notification, the rail yard pickup, the woman in the expensive coat, the way the sedan's license plates had been obscured by mud. She remembered that now, the detail suddenly sharp in her mind. Victor listened without interrupting, but she felt him absorbing every word, processing information she didn't even know was important. When she finished, he nodded once. Then he pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. Night Shift Express, the app she'd downloaded. Except now, according to his phone, it didn't exist. The page showed an error. Application not found. This service is no longer available. That's impossible. I used it 3 hours ago. They erased it. Victor's voice was matter-of-fact. The moment you completed the delivery, the application was removed from every server. Payment trails erased. Customer service number disconnected. Within 10 minutes, it was as if Night Shift Express never existed. Rochelle's vision tunneled. But I saw reviews. 5 stars. Verified. Fabricated. All of it. Victor pocketed his phone. You were selected, Rochelle, not randomly, very carefully. Single mother, immigrant, financial pressure, no family network in the city, no one who would immediately notice if you disappeared. The words landed like physical blows. They researched you, Victor continued, his tone clinical. Found your vulnerabilities, designed an approach they knew you couldn't refuse. The timing wasn't accidental, y'all. New Year's Eve, maximum desperation, minimum support. Rochelle couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in her ears. I would never. I know. And somehow his certainty was worse than accusation. That's exactly why they chose you. Peter whimpered, sensing his mother's distress. Rochelle pulled him against her, her mind fracturing into panic and rage, and a grief so profound she thought it might swallow her whole. What do they want? Her voice cracked. Why me? Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes, something that might have been sympathy in a man who allowed himself such luxuries. You were the delivery mechanism, untraceable, disposable. They needed someone who would come to this address without suspicion, without preparation, someone who wouldn't question urgency because urgency was already your reality. They used my desperation. Yes, the word hung in the air between them. Brutal. True. Rochelle looked down at Peter, at his small hands clutching her sweater, at the trust in his eyes that she'd promised never to betray. And she understood with crystalline clarity that tonight hadn't been bad luck or bad timing. Tonight had been orchestrated, weaponized. Her survival instincts, her love for her son, her refusal to give up, all of it had been studied, calculated, and used against her. Across the room, she heard the soft click of security locks engaging, electronic deadbolts sliding into place, the fortress sealing itself. Victor watched her process this, patient as stone. Finally, Rochelle raised her eyes to his. What happens now? Victor tilted his head slightly, considering. Now, he said quietly, we find out exactly who wanted me to receive that box, and why they were willing to sacrifice you to deliver it. The unspoken truth settled over Rochelle like ice. She wasn't walking out of this house tonight. Maybe not ever. And the worst part was, she was starting to understand that outside these walls might be even more dangerous than inside them. Chapter 3. Victor Langford had survived 3 assassination attempts before his 35th birthday. The first had been crude, a car bomb that detonated 12 seconds after he'd exited the vehicle, close enough that he'd felt the heat sear the back of his neck. The second had been sophisticated, poison in his wine at a charity gala, neutralized only because his security chief had noticed the server's hand tremor. The third had been personal, a betrayal from within his inner circle, a man he'd trusted, who'd aimed a gun at Victor's chest and pulled the trigger. Victor had survived because he'd learned the first rule of power. Trust was the most dangerous luxury. He stood now in his command center, watching the Jamaican woman hold her child, and felt something he'd thought he'd successfully excised from his psyche 8 years ago. Conscience, inconvenient, he thought, and dangerous. 8 years earlier. Victor had been different then, younger, still capable of believing that wealth and success were shields against human cruelty. He'd built his empire ethically, or as ethically as one could in industries built on competition and corporate warfare. He'd mentored promising executives, donated to causes, maintained relationships that weren't strictly transactional. Then came New Year's Eve 2018. The party at his Connecticut estate had been elegant, controlled, 200 guests celebrating the year's successes. Victor had been standing on the terrace, champagne glass in hand, discussing a merger with a colleague, when he'd noticed his head of security, Matthias Keene, a man he'd known for 12 years, moving through the crowd with wrong energy, too purposeful, too focused. Victor had started to turn just as Matthias raised a Glock 9mm and fired. The first shot had hit Victor's shoulder. The second would have hit his heart if Victor's instinct hadn't thrown him sideways. The third shattered the champagne glass in his hand as he dove behind a stone pillar. Matthias had walked closer, methodically, while guests screamed and scattered. They said you wouldn't see it coming, Matthias had said, almost conversational. They said you trusted me too much. Who? Victor had gasped, blood soaking through his tuxedo. Does it matter? Matthias had aimed carefully. You built something too valuable, too powerful. The only question was, who would control it after you were gone? The fourth shot had been intercepted by Zephyrin, Victor's youngest security analyst, who tackled Matthias from behind. In the chaos that followed, Matthias had escaped, disappearing into networks so deep that even Victor's resources couldn't trace him. But the message had been clear. Victor's empire wasn't his own. It was a prize, and he was simply the current obstacle. Victor had spent the next 8 years removing obstacles of his own, systematically, ruthlessly. He dismantled rival networks, bought out competitors, and built walls, literal and metaphorical, around everything he'd created. He'd also severed every relationship that wasn't absolutely necessary. No friends, no romantic entanglements, no vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The house on the riverfront, this glass fortress, had been designed as both sanctuary and statement, impenetrable, isolated, a place where Victor controlled every variable. No one entered without his knowledge, no one left without his permission, and absolutely no one delivered gifts. President Victor studied the box on his desk, still wrapped in crimson paper despite Zephyrin's initial scan. The wrapping itself was a message, red, the color of urgency and blood, deliberate. Beside him, Zephyrin adjusted his tablet. Sir, the woman's story checks out. Rochelle Martin, age 32, migrated from Jamaica 6 years ago on a work visa that expired. She's been cycling through temporary work permits ever since. No criminal record, no political affiliations, no connections to any of our known adversaries. Which makes her perfect, Victor said quietly. Sir, she's exactly who she appears to be, which means whoever orchestrated this knew we'd verify her background and find nothing. They wanted someone genuinely innocent, someone whose presence would be disarming. Victor's gaze shifted to the sofa where Rochelle sat, still holding her son. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging, just holding the child with a fierce protectiveness that Victor recognized because he'd once felt it for things he'd cared about, before he'd learned that caring made you vulnerable. The child wasn't supposed to be here, Zephyrin observed. No, that's the variable they didn't account for. Victor moved closer to the box. They expected a desperate woman making a delivery alone, easy to contain, easy to eliminate if necessary. Should I? No, Victor's voice was sharp. No one touches them. Not until I understand what this is. He reached for the bottle and Rochelle's voice cut through the room, raw and defiant. Don't open it. Victor paused, turning. Excuse me? If it's what you think it is, a threat, a trap, then opening it might be exactly what they want. Rochelle's accent was thicker now, stress stripping away the careful neutrality she'd maintained. In Kingston, when the gangs wanted to send messages, they'd leave packages. People who opened them didn't walk away. Victor studied her with new attention. She was intelligent, observant, already thinking tactically despite her fear. Interesting. This isn't Kingston, he said, and the message has already been sent. The delivery itself was the signal. The contents are secondary. Then why open it? Because I need to know exactly what they think I should fear. Victor pulled on a pair of thin gloves and carefully sliced through the crimson paper. The wrapping fell away to reveal a black lacquered box, unmarked, expensive. The kind of thing that cost more than Rochelle earned in a month. He opened the lid. Inside, nestled in white silk, lay 3 items. First, a key. Old-fashioned, ornate, the kind that opened physical locks rather than electronic systems. Brass, with an intricate head that bore a symbol Victor recognized immediately. The seal of the Trenton Syndicate, the network his father had helped dismantle 30 years ago. A network that, according to every source Victor trusted, no longer existed. Second, a photograph. 8 by 10, high quality. Victor himself, taken 3 weeks ago outside his downtown office. The angle suggested a professional photographer. The red line drawn across his throat suggested professional intent. Third, a note. handwritten on expensive paper in elegant script. Your father's sins are now your inheritance. Midnight brings accountability. M.K. Victor's jaw tightened. M.K. Matthias Keene, the man who tried to kill him 8 years ago, was back, and he'd brought ghosts. Sir? Zephyr's voice was careful. The Trenton Syndicate was destroyed, or so we believed. Victor set the note down with deliberate care. Apparently we believed wrong. Behind him, Rochelle had gone rigid. What does it mean? Victor turned to face her. It means the people who sent you weren't random enemies. They're connected to something that should have ended before you were born. And they chose tonight, New Year's Eve, because it's symbolic. A transition, an ending and a beginning. The ending of what? Me. Victor's tone was matter of fact. They want to finish what they started 8 years ago. Peter's small voice broke the tension. Is it a New Year toy? Everyone turned. The boy was looking at the brass key with innocent curiosity, his fear forgotten in the presence of something shiny and interesting. Victor felt something crack in his carefully maintained composure. The child had no context for danger, no understanding that the pretty key represented death, just wonder. When was the last time Victor had felt wonder about anything? He knelt slowly, bringing himself to Peter's eye level. The movement surprised everyone, including Victor himself. He didn't interact with children, didn't allow unpredictability into his environment. But Peter was looking at him with open, curious eyes, waiting for an answer. Not a toy, Victor said quietly. A reminder. Of what? That some doors should stay locked. Peter considered this seriously. Mama says locked doors keep safe things safe. Your mother is very wise. Rochelle's voice was tight with emotion. Peter, don't bother Mr. He's not bothering me. Victor stood, but his gaze lingered on the child for a moment longer. Then he turned to Zephyrin. Full lockdown. No one in or out. I want thermal imaging on every approach, and the lights cut out. Emergency systems kicked in immediately, bathing everything in red. Alarms began to pulse. Soft, insistent, coded. Perimeter breach. Zephyrin was already moving, his weapon drawn. Sir, we have multiple signatures. East entrance. They're not waiting. Victor's mind calculated instantly. The delivery had been timed. The box opened. The lights cut at precisely the moment when Victor would be distracted by its contents. Professional, coordinated, and targeting the east entrance. The one blind spot in his surveillance grid that Victor had personally sealed 3 years ago. Someone knew his systems intimately. Victor moved to Rochelle with startling speed. She flinched back, clutching Peter, but Victor's voice was steady and commanding. Listen carefully. When I say move, you take your son and follow Zephyrin to the secure room. You stay there until someone comes for you. You don't open the door for anyone except me or Zephyrin. Do you understand? What's happening? They're not waiting for midnight. Victor's eyes met hers. The box was a distraction. The real attack is now. Glass shattered somewhere in the house, distant but distinct. Rochelle gasped, and Peter began to cry. Victor made a decision that surprised him even as he made it. He stepped between Rochelle and the door, positioning himself as a shield, as protection. Go, he ordered. Now. Zephyrin grabbed Rochelle's arm, pulling her toward a panel in the wall that slid open to reveal a reinforced passage. She stumbled, trying to hold Peter and move at the same time, her eyes wide with terror. As she disappeared into the safe room, Victor caught her gaze one last time. No one touches them, he said to Zephyrin, loud enough for Rochelle to hear, clear enough to be a command. The panel sealed shut. Victor pulled a weapon from a hidden compartment, chambered around, and moved toward the sound of breaking glass. 8 years ago, they'd caught him unprepared, celebrating, trusting. Tonight, they'd find him ready, and this time, there would be no escape for anyone. Chapter 4. The secure room was 12 by 14 feet of reinforced steel and surveillance technology. No windows, no decorations, just gray walls, a single bench, and a panel of monitors showing different angles of Victor's fortress under siege. Rochelle pressed Peter against her chest, his tears soaking through her coat. Shh, baby, shh. We're safe here. But she was lying. She could see the monitors, could see dark figures moving through corridors with military precision, could see Victor and his security team engaging them with controlled bursts of gunfire that echoed even through the reinforced walls. Zephyrin stood by the door, weapon ready, his silver-streaked hair catching the red emergency lighting. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm." "Calm?" Rochelle's voice cracked. "There are men with guns in this house. My son is here. Don't tell me to be calm." "Fair enough." Zephyrin's tone softened slightly. "But panicking won't help him." Rochelle forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. The way she'd learned to breathe through panic attacks after Peter was born, when the reality of single motherhood in a foreign country had threatened to drown her. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. Maybe she could call the police. Maybe someone could. The screen was dark. Dead. No signal. No power. "They're jamming communications," Zephyrin said, reading her expression. "Standard protocol for this kind of assault. You won't be able to call anyone. So we just wait?" "Yes." Rochelle looked back at the monitors. Victor was moving through his own house like it was a battlefield, every movement economical and precise. She'd thought him cold before. Now she realized cold wasn't the right word. Controlled. That's what he was. Absolutely controlled. On screen, he neutralized one intruder with 3 shots. Center mass, no hesitation. The body dropped and Victor moved on without looking back. Rochelle felt her stomach turn. "He's killed before." "Many times." Zephyrin didn't sugarcoat it. "Mr. Langford isn't a civilian, ma'am. He can't afford to be." "What is he?" Zephyrin glanced at her, assessing. Then, apparently deciding she'd earned some truth. "A survivor. Same as you." Before Rochelle could respond, the door handle rattled. She gasped, pulling Peter tighter. Zephyrin moved instantly, positioning himself between them and the door, weapon raised. "Override code. Zephyrin 77 Alpha," a voice called from outside. "Female. Calm." Zephyrin lowered his weapon slightly. "Identify." "Cassia Thorne, head of external intelligence. Mr. Langford sent me to secure the secondary assets." Secondary assets. That's what Rochelle was now. Not a person, an asset. Zephyrin opened the door after checking the biometric scanner. The woman who entered was in her late 30s, athletic build with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. She wore tactical gear like she'd been born in it. "Status?" she asked Zephyrin. "3 hostiles neutralized, 2 retreating. Mr. Langford is securing the east corridor." Cassia nodded, then turned to Rochelle. "Ms. Martin, I'm going to ask you some questions. I need honest answers, and I need them quickly." "I already told Victor everything." "Tell me anyway." Cassia pulled up a portable tablet. "You downloaded the Night Shift Express app at 6:47 p.m., correct?" "Yes." "Did you receive any other notifications from that app before tonight?" Rochelle tried to remember through the fog of adrenaline. "No, just... Wait, yes. 2 days ago, a notification saying I'd been pre-selected for priority delivery opportunities. I thought it was spam." Cassia typed rapidly. "Did you click on it?" I think so. Maybe?" "Think harder." Yes, I clicked it. It asked permission to access my location and contacts. I declined the contacts but allowed location because..." Rochelle's voice trailed off as realization hit. "Oh God, that's how they tracked me. That's how they profiled you." Cassia's fingers flew across the screen. "Once you gave location permission, they had access to your routines. Where you worked, where you lived, where your son went to school. They spent 2 days learning everything about your life." Rochelle felt bile rise in her throat. "They watched me. They studied you." Cassia pulled up data, maps showing Rochelle's movements over the past 48 hours. Every trip to the grocery store, every walk to Peter's school, the laundromat, the library, all of it tracked, recorded, analyzed. Peter whimpered, and Rochelle realized she was holding him too tightly. She loosened her grip, but her mind was reeling. "The payment," Rochelle whispered. "They said cash on delivery, $300. Cassia nodded. "The money was real. They needed you to commit fully. If the payment had been deferred or promised rather than guaranteed, you might have hesitated. The cash was bait that didn't feel like bait. But why? Why go through all this just to deliver a box? Because Mr. Langford's security screens every delivery, Zephyrin explained. Commercial services, verified credentials, established protocols. But a desperate single mother making an independent delivery on New Year's Eve? You bypassed every filter we had. Rochelle stared at him. You mean I'm the reason they got in? If I hadn't come here, they would have found another way, Cassia interrupted firmly. This wasn't about you specifically. You fit a profile they needed. Single parent, financial pressure, immigrant status that makes you hesitant to involve authorities. If it hadn't been you, they'd have found someone else just like you. That doesn't make it better. No, but it makes it not your fault. Gunfire erupted again, closer this time. Peter screamed and Rochelle instinctively curled over him, trying to make herself a shield. Cassia checked her weapon. Zephyrin, I need you on the west perimeter. I'll stay with them. Ma'am, protocol says we protect Victor Langford. Right now, that means making sure whoever sent that box doesn't get a second chance. Cassia's voice was steel. Go. Zephyrin hesitated for half a second, then nodded and disappeared through the door. Silence fell, broken only by Peter's muffled crying and the distant sounds of combat. Cassia knelt beside Rochelle, her expression softening infinitesimally. Your son's name is Peter? Rochelle nodded, unable to speak. Peter, my name is Cassia. I know you're scared. I'm scared too sometimes. But the man outside, Victor, he's very good at keeping people safe. Do you believe me? Peter peeked out from Rochelle's arms. Is he a superhero? Something like that. Does he have powers? He has something better. He has training and friends, and he made a promise to your mom that no one would hurt you. Victor doesn't break promises. Rochelle wanted to ask how Cassia could possibly know that, but something in the woman's voice suggested she'd tested Victor's promises before and found them solid. On the monitors, the fighting was slowing. Bodies lay motionless in corridors. Victor appeared on screen, blood on his sleeve but moving without evident injury. He spoke into a communication device, and moments later, Zephyrin and two other security personnel converged on his location. Cassia watched the screens carefully. They're retreating. Where's you? Because they got what they came for. The box was already delivered. Not the box. Cassia turned to look at Rochelle directly. You. They came to confirm you were here, to prove their intelligence was accurate, to demonstrate they could breach Victor's security using his own sense of mercy against him. Rochelle's blood ran cold. You mean because he protected us instead of treating you as potential threats? Yes. Cassia stood. You need to understand something, Ms. Martin. Victor Langford has survived as long as he has because he eliminates variables. Unknown factors, potential dangers. The fact that you're still breathing means he's made a calculation that goes against every survival instinct he's honed over 8 years. What calculation? That protecting you serves a purpose. Either strategic or... Cassia paused. Something else. Before Rochelle could ask what that meant, the door opened. Victor stepped through, blood on his hands, his suit jacket torn, but his expression utterly composed. His eyes found Rochelle immediately. You're unharmed? Yes. We're fine. Victor nodded once, then turned to Cassia. Status report. 4 hostiles neutralized. 2 escaped via the east perimeter breach. They left this. Cassia held up a phone, one of the dead intruder's devices. Victor took it, scrolled through briefly, and his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he pocketed the device and turned back to Rochelle. Miss Martin, Rochelle, he corrected himself, using her first name with deliberate care. I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm while I do. Rochelle clutched Peter tighter. What? The address you used tonight, your home address, was accessed by the same network that created the Night Shift app. They know where you live. They have photographs of your apartment, your son's school, your regular routes. The room tilted. No, they can't. They can, and they have. Victor's voice was gentle but unrelenting. If you leave this house, they will find you, and they will use you to leverage me, which means, which means we're trapped. Rochelle heard her own voice as if from a distance. You're telling me we can't go home. I'm telling you that home is no longer safe. For how long? Victor met her eyes, and in them, Rochelle saw something she hadn't expected. Regret. I don't know, he admitted. But until I dismantle the network that sent you here, anywhere outside these walls is a death sentence. Rochelle wanted to scream, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all. She'd been trying to survive, trying to feed her son, trying to do everything right in a city that made doing right nearly impossible. And now she was a prisoner in a stranger's fortress, her freedom traded for the mistake of knocking on the wrong door. You didn't choose this, Victor said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. But you're in it now, and I give you my word, whatever that's worth to you, that I will keep you both alive. Rochelle looked down at Peter, who had finally stopped crying, exhausted. His small hand gripped her shirt, trusting her to make the right choice. But there was no right choice, only survival. She raised her eyes to Victor's. What happens now? Now, he said, you stay. Under my protection, until I end this. And if you can't? Victor's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Then we'll reconsider our options, but failure isn't something I entertain often. It wasn't comfort, but it was the closest thing to a promise Rochelle was going to get. She nodded slowly. Okay, but on my terms. Victor tilted his head, curious. Which are? Peter's safety comes first. Not yours, not mine. His. That's non-negotiable. Agreed. And when this is over, however it ends, we walk away. No obligations, no debts, clean. Victor studied her for a long moment. You're negotiating with me. I'm protecting my son. If that offends you, I don't care. The corner of Victor's mouth lifted in something that might have been a smile, might have been respect. It doesn't offend me, Rochelle. It confirms something. What? That they chose the wrong woman to be disposable. Chapter 5. The secure room had 3 monitors, each displaying different sectors of Victor's compound. Rochelle watched them with growing dread as figures appeared on the thermal imaging, more than before, moving with coordinated precision through the exterior grounds. Sir, Cassia's voice was tight. We have a problem. Victor was already pulling up additional feeds on a tablet. The first wave was reconnaissance. And the second? The actual assault. Victor's fingers moved across the screen, activating countermeasures. They wanted to test our response time, our defenses, our willingness to engage. Now they know. Rochelle felt her chest constrict. How many? At least 8, possibly more. Victor didn't look at her, focused entirely on the tactical display. They're surrounding the compound. Classic pincer formation. In the middle of the city? Rochelle couldn't process it. Someone will call the police. Someone will. No one will. Cassia checked her weapon, methodically efficient. The nearest occupied building is 3 blocks away. We're in a designated luxury zone with minimal foot traffic. And New Year's Eve means most security companies are stretched thin with false alarms and celebration-related incidents. They chose tonight because we'd be isolated, Victor confirmed. Police response time in this district is 15 minutes minimum. They'll be gone in 10. Peter stirred in Rochelle's arms, mercifully still asleep despite the tension. She held him closer, feeling his heartbeat against hers, steady and trusting. On screen, the thermal signatures moved closer. One team approaching the reinforced east entrance they'd breached earlier, another circling toward what looked like a service access on the north side, a third holding position near the main gates. They're going to hit us from 3 directions simultaneously, Zephyr's voice crackled through the communication system. Sir, I recommend we fall back to the central core and— No. Victor's tone was absolute. If we retreat, they control the pace. We engage now on our terms. Sir, the civilians are secure. You have your orders. Rochelle watched Victor work, his composure never cracking despite the impossible odds. 4 security personnel against at least 8 trained attackers, and he was choosing offense over defense. You're going to fight them, she whispered. Yes. You could die. I could. Victor finally looked at her. Would you prefer I surrender? Let them in? See what mercy they show you and your son? Rochelle's throat tightened. She'd seen the box's contents. The photograph with the red line across Victor's throat. Whatever these people wanted, it ended in blood. No, she managed. Then trust me to do what I'm trained for. Victor moved toward the door, then paused. Cassia stays with you. If anyone except me or Zephyrin tries to open this door, she'll protect you. That's not a comfort. That's a promise. Before Rochelle could respond, the lights cut out again. Complete darkness for 3 seconds. Then emergency lighting kicked in, painting everything crimson. They're cutting power to disorient us, Cassia said calmly. Won't work. We have independent generators for critical systems. On the monitors, Rochelle saw Victor moving through the corridors, flanked by Zephyrin and another security officer whose name she didn't know. They moved like a unit, weapons raised, each covering different angles with practiced efficiency. The first breach came at the service entrance. Rochelle watched on screen as one of the attackers forced the door with some kind of mechanical device. He stepped through, weapon raised, and Zephyrin took him down with 2 shots. Clean, efficient. The body dropped. One down, Zephyrin's voice crackled. North entrance compromised but contained. But even as he spoke, 2 more figures poured through the gap. These moved faster, trained operators who'd expected resistance. They split up, one engaging Zephyrin, while the other advanced toward the central corridor, toward Victor. Rochelle couldn't breathe as she watched Victor turn, weapon raised. The attacker fired first. 3 rapid shots that sparked off the steel beam. Victor dove behind. Then Victor returned fire, and Rochelle saw the attacker stumble, clutch his leg, and retreat. Hostile injured, retreating. Victor's voice was steady as if reporting weather. Zephyrin status? Engaged. Could use. The audio cut as gunfire drowned out speech. On another monitor, the east entrance exploded inward. Not forced, exploded. Someone had placed a shaped charge, blowing the reinforced door off its hinges. 3 attackers rushed through the smoke. Jesus, Cassia whispered. That's military-grade explosive. Who are these people? Rochelle demanded. Professionals? Cassia's hand tightened on her weapon. Very expensive professionals. Victor was already repositioning, moving to intercept the East team. He gestured to his 3rd security officer, a younger man Rochelle hadn't seen before, and they split up, flanking the attackers from 2 directions. What followed happened too fast for Rochelle to fully process. Muzzle flashes, bodies moving with lethal precision, Victor shooting with clinical accuracy while his security officer provided covering fire. 1 attacker went down, then another, but the 3rd got through. Rochelle saw him on screen, running toward the central corridor, toward the secure room, toward them. Cassia, Rochelle started. I see him. Cassia moved to the door, positioning herself directly in front of it. Stay behind me. Cover Peter's ears. What? Why would... The door handle rattled, not electronic override. Physical force. Someone was trying to break through. Cassia raised her weapon, aimed at head height. Federal protocols, she called through the door. Identify yourself or I fire. No response. Just another rattle, more violent this time. Then, shockingly, a voice, "Who came? I'm coming in, don't shoot." Victor's voice. Cassia lowered her weapon fractionally, checking the biometric scanner. Verification code? Alpha 77 Zephyrin. And tell Ms. Martin her son needs to keep his eyes closed. Cassia glanced at Rochelle, who immediately pressed Peter's face against her shoulder. Don't look, baby. Don't look. The door opened. Victor stepped through, and Rochelle's stomach turned. He was covered in blood, his face, his hands, his torn suit jacket, but his expression remained eerily calm. Are you hurt? Cassia asked immediately. Not my blood. Victor moved to the monitors, scrolling through camera feeds with blood-slicked fingers. The East team is neutralized. Zephyrin is securing the North entrance. The 3rd team hasn't engaged yet. Why not? Because they're waiting. For what? Victor pulled up a feed showing the main gates. 6 figures stood there, weapons holstered, making no attempt to breach. One of them held up a phone, displaying it to the camera. On the screen was a message. 12 Rochelle looked at the clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m. They're waiting for midnight, Shuddy whispered. Symbolic completion. Victor's jaw tightened. They want me to watch the year turn while surrounded, while isolated, while understanding that they can reach me whenever they choose. But they haven't won, Cassia pointed out. We've repelled 2 waves. They don't care about winning tonight. Victor turned from the monitors, his eyes finding Rochelle. They care about the message, about proving that nowhere is safe, not even here. Peter stirred, mumbling in his sleep. Rochelle rocked him gently, her mind reeling with the nightmare her life had become in the space of 3 hours. What do we do? She asked. Victor studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt beside her, bringing himself to her eye level despite the blood and violence that clung to him. I'm going to make you a promise, he said quietly, and I need you to believe me when I make it. I don't even know you. I know, but I'm still going to make it. Victor's eyes held hers. No one touches you or your son. Not tonight, not ever. Whatever this costs me, whatever I have to do, you both survive this. That's not negotiable. Why? Rochelle's voice cracked. Why do you care? You didn't know I existed 4 hours ago. Victor didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice carried something Rochelle hadn't heard from him before. Vulnerability. 8 years ago, I trusted the wrong person. It cost me everything I thought I knew about human nature. I've spent every day since then ensuring I never make that mistake again. I built walls. I severed connections. I made myself unreachable. He gestured toward the monitors. And tonight you walked into my fortress carrying your son's hand and a stranger's trap. And I realized something I'd forgotten. What? That isolation isn't the same as safety. That walls don't protect, they just delay the inevitable. Victor's expression softened infinitesimally. Your son looked at that key and asked if it was a New Year toy. He saw wonder where I saw threat. And I remembered what it felt like to see the world that way. Rochelle felt tears prick her eyes. You're protecting us because Peter reminded you of something? I'm protecting you because failing to do so would make me exactly what they want me to be. A man who values his own survival over everyone else's humanity. And I refuse to give them that satisfaction. On the monitors, the clock ticked closer to midnight, 11:52. The figures at the gate remained motionless, waiting. Victor stood, transforming back into the controlled tactician. Cassia, I need you to take them to the underground garage. Vehicle 7, if I'm not there by 12:05. You drive, don't stop, don't look back. Sir, that's an order. Rochelle grabbed his sleeve, her hand small against the expensive fabric. What are you going to do? Victor met her eyes, and in them, Rochelle saw something that chilled her more than the violence. Resignation. I'm going to walk out there, he said simply, and I'm going to end this, one way or another. They'll kill you. Maybe. Victor gently removed her hand from his sleeve, but they'll be focused on me, which means they won't be focused on you. Cassia, go. Now. Victor, Cassia started. Now. The word was absolute. Command. Final. Cassia grabbed Rochelle's arm, pulling her toward a panel that slid open to reveal a narrow staircase leading down. Rochelle stumbled, clutching Peter, looking back at Victor, standing in the crimson emergency lighting like a sacrifice preparing for an altar. Don't die for us, Rochelle said, surprising herself with the words. We're not worth— You are, Victor interrupted. You just don't know it yet. The panel slid closed between them, and Rochelle was running downstairs, Cassia ahead with weapon drawn, Peter heavy in her arms, the clock ticking toward midnight, while above them, Victor Langford walked toward his own potential execution, because he'd made a promise, and apparently he kept those. They reached the garage, a cavernous space filled with vehicles Rochelle couldn't afford to dream about. Cassia led her to a black SUV, armored and anonymous. Inside, back seat. Stay low. Rochelle obeyed, her body moving on autopilot. Through the vehicle's tinted windows, she could see monitors displaying the compound's camera feeds. Victor was walking through the main corridor, alone, unarmed, or at least with his weapons holstered, walking toward the main gate with measured steps. What is he doing? Rochelle whispered. He's drawing them out. Cassia's voice was tense. If they think he's vulnerable, they'll engage directly instead of waiting. It gives Zephyrin and the others time to flank. That's insane. That's Victor. On screen, the main gate opened. Victor stepped through into the snow-covered courtyard. The six figures advanced, weapons raised, and then the clock struck midnight. Fireworks exploded across the city, color and light and celebration. The whole world turning toward a new year while Rochelle watched a man walk toward death because she'd knocked on the wrong door. The attackers fired. Rochelle screamed, couldn't help it, clutching Peter as gunfire erupted on every camera feed. But Victor was moving, fast, impossibly fast. He dropped, rolled, came up with a weapon from somewhere, and returned fire with devastating precision. Two attackers went down before the others scattered. Then Zephyrin appeared from the west, flanking them, and the other security officers from the north. Caught between Victor's forward position and his team's crossfire, the remaining attackers had nowhere to go. It was over in 90 seconds. Rochelle watched Victor stand in the snow, surrounded by bodies, breathing hard but alive. Alive. Cassia exhaled slowly. He did it. He's crazy. Yes, but he's our crazy. Cassia smiled grimly, and he just made sure you never have to be afraid of them again. On screen, Victor was walking back toward the compound. He paused at the gate, looked directly at the camera, and spoke into his communication device. Cassia, bring them back up. It's over. Are you sure? I'm sure. The threat is contained. The message is sent. They won't try again tonight. And tomorrow? Victor's pause was brief but telling. Tomorrow is a new year. We'll handle it when it comes. Rochelle closed her eyes, feeling the full weight of exhaustion and terror crash over her. Peter was still asleep, mercifully, miraculously asleep. They were alive. But as Cassia drove the SUV back toward the main entrance, as fireworks continued to light the sky in celebration of a year that had brought Rochelle nothing but survival and sacrifice, she understood with perfect clarity that her life had truly divided. There was before she knocked on Victor Langford's door, and there was after, and she would never fully belong to either world again. Chapter 6, 12:17 a.m., January 1st. The compound was silent in the aftermath. Bodies had been removed by Victor's security team with efficient professionalism. Blood cleaned from marble floors, broken glass swept and replaced. Within 2 hours, the only evidence of violence was the acrid smell of gunpowder lingering in the air and the replacement door being welded into place at the east entrance. Rochelle sat in a sitting room she hadn't seen before, smaller than the command center, warmer with actual furniture that looked meant for humans rather than tactical briefings. A fire burned in a gas fireplace. Someone had brought her tea that she hadn't touched. Peter slept on the sofa beside her, curled under a cashmere blanket that probably cost more than their monthly rent. His face was peaceful, untouched by the horror that had unfolded around him. Rochelle wanted to feel grateful, wanted to feel relief, but all she felt was numb. The door opened quietly. Victor entered, and Rochelle barely recognized him. He'd changed clothes, simple black shirt and trousers, the blood washed away. His hair was damp from a recent shower. Without the tactical vest and weapons, he looked younger, less fortress and more human. But his eyes held the same weight. He sat across from her, not speaking immediately, just present. You should rest, Rochelle said finally, her voice hoarse. So should you. I can't. I know. They sat in silence. Outside, distant fireworks still occasionally lit the sky, the city celebrating while Rochelle's world had shattered. The men who attacked, Rochelle started. Are they? Dead, 4 of them, 2 escaped. 2 were captured. Victor's tone was matter of fact. The ones who survived are being questioned by Zephyrin. You mean interrogated? I mean questioned. There's a difference. We need information, not revenge. Rochelle almost laughed, the absurdity of discussing interrogation like it was a business transaction. And when you have your information? What then? Victor leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. Then I dismantle the network that sent them. Systematically, until the people who used you understand that it was a mistake, they won't survive. Revenge, then. Justice, Wertichten. Victor's voice hardened. There's a difference, is there, Chiti? Yes, revenge is emotional. Justice is structural. I'm not angry at them, Rochelle. I'm simply ensuring they can never do this again. To anyone. Rochelle looked at Peter, at his small chest rising and falling with sleep. You really believe you can stop them? Whoever they are. I know I can. How? Because I have resources they don't. And more importantly, I have motivation. Victor stood, moving to the window. 8 years ago, someone tried to kill me. I responded by building walls, by isolating, by removing every possible vulnerability from my life. It kept me alive, but it didn't keep me safe. Tonight proved that. So what changes? Victor turned to face her. Everything. I've spent 8 years assuming the threat was external. That if I controlled my environment perfectly, I could control my risk. But you walk through my door, you and your son, and expose the flaw in that thinking. Which is? That perfect control is impossible. That life breaks through eventually, invited or not. And that trying to prevent all vulnerability only makes you vulnerable in ways you can't anticipate. Rochelle studied him. You're saying we're a liability. No. Victor's expression softened imperceptibly. I'm saying you're a reminder that humanity exists even in carefully controlled systems. That protection means something more than surveillance and weapons. Protection. Rochelle tasted the word. That's what you're calling in this? What would you call it? Imprisonment. The word hung in the air between them. Victor didn't flinch. I understand why you see it that way. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, I'm trapped in a stranger's house with no way to leave, no way to contact anyone, and no idea when or if my life goes back to normal. It won't. The bluntness of it made Rochelle's chest tight. Excuse me. Victor moved closer, kneeling so they were eye level. I need you to understand something, and I need you to hear it clearly. The people who used you tonight, they have your address, your son's school information, your work history, your immigration status, everything that makes you vulnerable. So I'm a target. Yes, but more than that, your leverage. Victor's voice was gentle but unrelenting. If you leave this compound, they will find you. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but eventually. And when they do, they'll use you to get to me, which means I'm stuck here. Rochelle felt tears threaten but refused to let them fall. For how long? Until I've eliminated the threat. Completely. And how long is that? Days, weeks, years? Weeks, maybe a month. I'm not asking you to stay indefinitely. Rochelle laughed bitterly. You're not asking at all. You're telling me I don't have a choice. You have a choice. Victor's tone sharpened. You can leave right now. I'll have Cassia drive you home. Give you money for immediate relocation. Help you disappear if that's what you want. But I can't guarantee your safety or Peter's. The moment you step outside my protection, you're on your own. And they're very good at finding people who don't want to be found. Rochelle looked at her son, at his peaceful, sleeping face, at the life she'd fought so hard to build for him, now fractured beyond recognition. That's not a choice, she whispered. That's coercion. Yes, it is. Victor didn't pretend otherwise, and I'm not going to apologize for it because apologizing doesn't change reality. You walked into a war you didn't know existed. Now you're here, and I'm offering you the only protection I can. Proximity. Proximity to you. Yes. The most targeted man in the city. Also yes. Rochelle wanted to scream, wanted to grab Peter and run and never look back. But Victor was right. She had no safe place to run to, no resources to disappear with, no way to protect her son from people who had money, training, and motivation to hurt them. She was trapped, not by walls or locks, but by reality. You said I could negotiate terms, Rochelle said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. I did. Then here are mine, She met his eyes, refusing to look away. Peter's education continues, not homeschooled, real school. I don't care if you have to hire tutors or set up some kind of remote system, but he doesn't lose his childhood because of this. Agreed. I work. I don't care what kind of work, but I'm not a prisoner sitting in luxury doing nothing. I earn my keep. Agreed. And when this is over, when you've done whatever you need to do to make us safe, we leave. No obligations, no debts. You don't get to claim we owe you anything." Victor tilted his head slightly. "You don't think protection is worth gratitude?" "I think protection I didn't ask for and can't refuse isn't a gift. It's a man. A comfortable cage, but still a cage." "Fair enough." Victor stood. "Anything else?" Rochelle thought for a moment. Then, "Respect. You don't make decisions about Peter without consulting me. You don't treat me like an asset or a problem to be managed. I'm his mother. That comes first." "Understood." Victor extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Rochelle looked at his hand, the same hand that had held weapons hours ago, that had killed to protect her, that was now offering her the only semblance of choice she had left. She took it. "We have an agreement." Victor's grip was firm, brief, professional. "Cassia will show you to your quarters, 2 bedrooms, private bathroom, access to the kitchen and common areas. If you need anything, there's a call system. More surveillance, more safety." Victor moved toward the door, then paused. "Rochelle Otari, for what it's worth, I am sorry this happened to you. If I could undo it, I would." "But you can't." "No, I can't." He opened the door. "Welcome to the house without a map. I hope you find it less awful than you're expecting." He left, closing the door softly behind him. Rochelle sat in the silence, watching fireworks fade from the sky, watching the year turn from one nightmare into another, watching Peter sleep, innocent and trusting that his mother would keep him safe. She'd negotiated terms, claimed agency, made demands, but deep down, she knew the truth. She wasn't negotiating with Victor Langford. She was negotiating with fate itself. And fate, as she was learning, rarely offered favorable terms. 3:47 a.m. Rochelle couldn't sleep. The guest quarters Victor had provided were beautiful. Cream walls, expensive linens, windows that overlooked the river. Peter was in the adjoining bedroom, finally settled after waking confused and asking where they were. "A friend's house," Rochelle had lied. "Just for a little while." Peter had accepted this with 6-year-old logic and fallen back asleep. But Rochelle lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment of the night. The knock, the door opening, the box, the gunfire, Victor's blood-covered face promising her protection. You can't go back. She wondered what was happening at her apartment right now. Whether her landlord had noticed she wasn't home, whether anyone cared. Probably not. That was the thing about being invisible. No one looked for you when you disappeared. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Rochelle tensed, then heard Cassia's voice. "Ms. Martin, I saw your light on. May I come in?" Rochelle opened the door. Cassia stood in tactical pants and a simple black shirt, looking alert despite the hour. "Can't sleep?" Cassia asked. "Would you?" "No," Cassia smiled grimly. "Mind if I sit?" They sat in the small living area of the guest suite, neither speaking for a moment. "I wanted to explain something," Cassia said finally. "About Victor, about why he's doing this. He told me he feels responsible." "It's more than that." Cassia leaned forward. 8 years ago, when Matthias Keene tried to kill him, it wasn't just a betrayal. Matthias had been Victor's head of security for 12 years. They were friends, or as close to friends as Victor allowed. So it was personal. It was devastating. Cassia's voice softened. Victor blamed himself for trusting, for caring, for believing loyalty meant something. After that, he made a choice to never be vulnerable again, to never let anyone close enough to hurt him. And now? Now you're here. You and your son, 2 people who have no reason to be loyal to him, no history, no agenda, just human beings who need help. Cassia met Rochelle's eyes. And for the first time in 8 years, Victor chose connection over isolation, chose to protect instead of eliminate. Do you understand what that means? That he's human? That he's healing, maybe, or at least remembering what healing looks like? Cassia stood. "I'm not asking you to be grateful, but I am asking you to understand. This isn't easy for him either. Protecting you goes against every survival instinct he's spent nearly a decade developing. Then why is he doing it?" Cassia smiled. "Because your son asked if the key was a New Year toy, and Victor remembered what innocence looked like." She left Rochelle alone with that thought. And somewhere in the silent fortress, behind walls of glass and steel, Rochelle imagined Victor Langford lying awake too. Both of them are trapped by the same wrong address. Both of them trying to survive what came next. Both of them changed by a knock on a door that should never have opened. Chapter 7, January 3rd, 8:47 a.m. Rochelle woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, and a moment of pure panic before memory crashed back. The delivery, the box, the gunfire, Victor's fortress. You can't go back. She reached for Peter instinctively, but his bed was empty. Terror spiked through her chest until she heard his voice from the other room, bright, curious, unafraid. And this one's called a monstera. It needs indirect light. Rochelle threw on the robe someone had left folded on a chair and rushed to the living area. Peter stood by the window, pointing at plants she hadn't noticed last night. Beside him, explaining with unexpected patience, stood Victor Langford. He'd changed since the New Year's Eve violence. Wore a simple gray sweater and dark trousers. No weapons visible. Hair slightly disheveled as if he'd actually slept, though the shadows under his eyes suggested otherwise. "Mama," Peter turned, beaming. "Victor's teaching me about plants. Did you know some of them clean the air?" Rochelle's throat tightened at the casual use of Victor's first name, as if they were friends, as if this was normal. "Peter, you shouldn't bother Mr. Langford. He's not bothering me." Victor's tone was even. I was awake. He was curious. It seemed efficient to address both circumstances. Efficient. Rochelle couldn't help the edge in her voice. That's one word for it. Victor met her eyes, and something passed between them. An understanding, perhaps, that they were both navigating impossible territory. "There's breakfast in the kitchen," he said. "Cassia arranged for dietary preferences. I hope Jamaican ackee and saltfish is acceptable." Rochelle blinked. How did you know?" "I asked Peter what you liked." Victor's expression remained neutral. He was very specific about the saltfish having to be properly soaked. Despite everything, Rochelle felt something crack in her chest. Not gratitude exactly. More like recognition that Victor was trying, in his controlled way, to make this bearable. "Thank you," she said quietly. Victor nodded once and moved toward the door. Peter grabbed his hand, unconscious, childlike, stopping him. "Will you eat with us?" Victor looked down at the small hand in his, clearly uncomfortable but not pulling away. "I have work, please." Peter's eyes held that particular 6-year-old earnestness that was impossible to deny. Victor hesitated. Rochelle watched the internal calculation play across his face. Duty versus what? Connection? Humanity? 15 minutes, he finally agreed. Then I have meetings. Peter grinned, victorious. Breakfast was surreal. The kitchen was massive. Industrial-grade appliances, marble countertops, enough space to serve 30 people. But they sat at a small table by the window, the three of them, eating food that tasted like home. Cassia had done her research. The ackee was perfectly cooked, the saltfish seasoned exactly right, served with fried dumplings and fresh mango. Rochelle hadn't tasted food this authentically Jamaican since she'd left Kingston. "How?" she asked Cassia, who stood by the counter reviewing a tablet. "Victor has connections everywhere, including an excellent Jamaican restaurant in Queens. They catered." Cassia smiled. "He wanted you to feel less displaced." Rochelle looked at Victor, who was listening to Peter explain his favorite cartoon with an expression that could almost be called interested. "You went to a lot of trouble," Rochelle said. "It wasn't trouble." Victor's tone suggested it was simply another task completed. "You're here indefinitely. Making you comfortable serves everyone's interests. Everything with you is strategic, isn't it?" "Yes." No apology, no justification, just honesty. Peter, oblivious to the tension, asked, "Victor, do you have any games? Mama says I can't watch too much TV, but I like games." "I don't have children's games." Victor's discomfort was visible. "I don't typically have children here." "That's okay. We can play pretend." "Do you know how to play pretend?" Rochelle wanted to intervene, to save Victor from her son's relentless enthusiasm, but Something made her pause. She wanted to see how Victor would handle this, whether he'd dismiss Peter or engage. Victor set down his fork with deliberate care. I'm not familiar with pretend. It's easy, you just imagine things, like you're a dragon and I'm a knight. Peter bounced in his chair. Or you're a pirate and I'm looking for treasure. I see. Victor considered this with the same seriousness he'd probably applied to billion-dollar mergers. And what role would you prefer I take? You should be the knight, because you have a big house like a castle, and Mama can be the queen we're protecting. Rochelle choked on her juice. Peter. That seems narratively sound, Victor said, surprising them both. Queens require protection. Knights provide it. The structure is logical. Peter squealed with delight. After breakfast? I have a meeting at 10. Before the meeting? Peter's eyes were impossibly wide, impossibly hopeful. Victor looked at Rochelle, something like helplessness crossing his face. She realized with shock that Victor Langford, billionaire survivor, tactician, had no idea how to refuse a 6-year-old child. 20 minutes, Rochelle said, offering him an out. Then Victor has work, and you have lessons. Lessons? Peter's enthusiasm dimmed. Did you think you'd just play all day? Rochelle softened her tone. We're going to do schoolwork. Reading, math, writing. Just because we're staying somewhere different doesn't mean you stop learning. I can arrange for tutors, Victor offered. Accredited educators. Remote or in person, whichever you prefer. In person means more people knowing we're here. Remote then. I'll have Cassia coordinated it. Victor stood, checking his watch. 20 minutes of pretend. Then I need to work. But as he followed Peter toward the living room, Rochelle saw something in his posture soften. Just slightly. Just enough to suggest that maybe Victor Langford was remembering what it felt like to be someone other than a fortress. 12:34 p.m. Rochelle found the library by accident, wandering the house while Peter napped after his morning lessons. The door had been open, light spilling into the hallway, and she'd stepped through without thinking. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, thousands of volumes, first editions mixed with worn paperbacks, technical manuals beside poetry collections, organized in a way that suggested actual reading rather than decoration. She ran her fingers along the spines, recognizing some titles, discovering others. Philosophy, history, fiction in multiple languages, a well-loved copy of Toni Morrison's Beloved, essays by James Baldwin, Claude McKay's poetry. You're surprised. Rochelle turned. Victor stood in the doorway, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled up, looking less corporate and more human than she'd seen him. I didn't expect you to read Morrison, Rochelle admitted. Why not? Because, she gestured vaguely, all of this, the fortress, the security, the control, it doesn't seem like the life of someone who reads about humanity. Victor stepped into the library, moving to a shelf. My mother was a literature professor before she married my father, before he paused. Before wealth made her someone else. She used to read to me, Baldwin, Morrison, Maya Angelou. She said if I was going to have power, I needed to understand the people power affected. Did you understand? I thought I did. Then I built an empire and realized understanding and empathy aren't the same thing. Victor pulled a book from the shelf, Baldwin's The Fire Next Time, and held it carefully. I read to remember what I'm in danger of forgetting. Rochelle moved closer. What's that? That money and control don't make you human. Connection does. Vulnerability does. The willingness to be affected by someone else's pain. He set the book down. I forgot that for 8 years. Your son reminded me in about 8 minutes. Peter has that effect on people. He has that effect on me. Victor's voice carried something Rochelle couldn't quite name. This morning, playing pretend, he insisted I couldn't just be a knight. I had to give my knight a name, a backstory, a reason for protecting the queen. He said knights who don't care about people are just soldiers. Despite herself, Rochelle smiled. He gets that from his grandmother. She used to say the same thing about police in Kingston. Uniforms don't make you protectors. Caring does. She was right. Victor turned to face her fully. I've been operating like a soldier for 8 years, efficient, strategic, emotionally insulated. It kept me alive, but he trailed off. But, Rochelle prompted, but I'm not sure it kept me human. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Rochelle saw Victor Langford not as a fortress, but as a man who'd survived by shutting down everything that made survival painful. You protected us, Rochelle said quietly, on New Year's Eve. That was human. That was strategic. Was it? She held his gaze. Because strategic would have been eliminating the variables, removing witnesses. Peter and I complicated your security. We were liabilities, but you chose to protect us anyway. Why? Victor didn't answer immediately. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard. Because when Peter asked if the key was a toy, I realized I'd spent 8 years seeing everything as a threat or a tool. But he saw possibility, wonder, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who'd forgotten the difference. Rochelle felt something shift between them. Not romance, too early, too complicated for that, but recognition. Two people who'd been made invisible by different circumstances, now seeing each other clearly. I need to tell you something, Rochelle said, about staying here, about accepting your protection. You don't have to justify. Let me finish. She took a breath. I'm not staying because I'm grateful, or because I think I owe you. I'm staying because Peter deserves to be safe, and because, she paused, surprising herself with the honesty, because I'm tired of being invisible, of survival being my only goal. Maybe being here, being seen as something other than a problem or a statistic, maybe that's worth the complications. Victor studied her. You think I see you? I think you're trying to, which is more than most people have done in 6 years. Something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of something that could become understanding given time. I have work, Victor said finally, but you're welcome to stay here. Read, use whatever you need. This space is yours while you're here. Victor? Rochelle called as he reached the door. Yes? Thank you for trying. I know it's not natural for you. Victor's mouth quirked slightly, not quite a smile, but close. Nothing about this is natural for me, but I'm finding that's not entirely a bad thing. He left, and Rochelle stood among the books, feeling for the first time since New Year's Eve that maybe she hadn't just walked into a fortress. Maybe she'd walked into a possibility. January 8th, 6:15 p.m. 1 week in the house without a map, and Rochelle was discovering its rhythms. Mornings, Peter's lessons with a remote tutor Victor had hired, a patient woman named Dr. Amara, who specialized in maintaining education continuity for children in witness protection. The irony wasn't lost on Rochelle. Afternoons, Rochelle working remotely for Victor's company. Not charity, actual work. Data analysis for his logistics division. Boring, systematic, but honest employment that meant she was earning her keep. Evenings, the strange domestic routine that had somehow developed. Peter insisting Victor eat dinner with them. Victor, increasingly less uncomfortable with this arrangement, actually showing up. Tonight, Peter was teaching Victor to play cards, go fish, of all things, with an intensity that suggested military training. Do you have any threes? Peter demanded. Go fish, Victor replied, his poker face impeccable. You're lying. You have threes. Then draw a card and prove me wrong. Rochelle watched from the kitchen, chopping vegetables for curry goat, another recipe Cassia had mysteriously sourced ingredients for. The domesticity was surreal. Victor Langford, billionaire fortress dweller, being schooled in cards by a 6-year-old. Mama, Victor's cheating. I'm employing strategy, Victor corrected. There's a difference. That's what cheaters say. Rochelle laughed despite herself. Peter, let the man play his cards. But he keeps winning. Because I understand probability, Victor explained patiently. When you ask for a number, you reveal information about your hand. I'm simply using that information. Peter stared at him. That's sneaky. That's intelligence gathering. You make everything sound like spy stuff. Victor's lips twitched. Perhaps because most interactions are spy stuff. Just lower stakes. Cassia entered with her usual silent efficiency, tablet in hand. "Sir, update on the investigation." Victor's expression shifted instantly, back to tactical, controlled. "Excuse me, Peter, I need to handle something." "But we're not done." "I'll finish the game later, I promise." Peter pouted but accepted this. Victor stood and Rochelle caught his eye, seeing the weight return to his features, the mask sliding back into place. She followed him to the hallway. "Is it bad?" Victor glanced at Cassia, who nodded permission. "We've identified the network that sent you. 3 key players. One is already in custody. The others are proving more difficult to locate. But you'll find them." "Yes. Certainty. Absolute." "And then what happens to us?" Victor met her eyes. "Then you are free. The threat ends, you leave, you rebuild your life." "Just like that?" "Just like that." Rochelle wanted to believe him, but something in his expression suggested it wasn't quite that simple. "How long?" "Another week, maybe 2. Victor's tone was careful. "I'm moving as quickly as I can without being reckless." "I know." And she did. She'd seen him working late into the night, heard him on phone calls coordinating resources across continents. He wasn't keeping them here out of paranoia. He was genuinely trying to end this. "Rochelle was there." Victor's voice was softer. "When this is over, when you leave, will you?" He trailed off, unusual for someone so precise with language. "Will I what?" Rochelle prompted. "Will you regret this? Being here? The complications?" Rochelle considered the question honestly. "Ask me when it's over." "Fair enough." Victor turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, having you here hasn't been the complication I expected." "What has it been?" Victor seemed to struggle with the answer. "Finally, a reminder that houses are supposed to have people in them, not just surveillance systems." He walked away with Cassia, leaving Rochelle in the hallway with a strange warmth in her chest that she couldn't quite name. January 10th, 11:43 p.m. Rochelle couldn't sleep again. She'd been having nightmares, reliving the moment the door opened, the gunfire, the blood. Each time she woke, gasping, checking to make sure Peter was still breathing in the next room. She walked to the library, seeking comfort in books, and found Victor already there. He sat in a leather chair by the window, reading by lamplight, a glass of whiskey untouched on the side table. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. He looked up, unsurprised by her presence. "I don't sleep well. Haven't in years." "The assassination attempt?" "That and other things." Victor closed his book, Edward Aurelius's Meditations, and gestured to the chair opposite. "You're having nightmares." "How did you know?" "Because I hear you wake up. The walls aren't as thick as they appear." He paused. "I'm sorry that it's affected you this way." Rochelle sat, drawing her robe tighter. "It's not your fault. Lynette, you're here because of decisions I made years ago, enemies I created, wars I fought. If you'd chosen differently, you'd probably be dead." Rochelle surprised herself with the sharpness. "You did what you had to do to survive, just like I did. We just survived different things." Victor looked at her with something like gratitude. "You don't blame me. I blame the people who used me, who thought I was disposable, who didn't care that I had a son." Rochelle leaned forward. "But you've done everything you could to fix a situation you didn't create. That's not blameworthy, that's decent." "Decent," Victor tested the word. "I haven't been called that in a long time. Maybe you should be called it more often." They sat in comfortable silence, the city glowing beyond the windows. After a while, Victor spoke again. "When this is over, when you leave, I'm going to miss this." "Miss what?" "Having someone to talk to. Someone who isn't paid to be here, who doesn't need anything from me except honesty." Victor's voice carried surprising vulnerability. "I forgot what that felt like." Rochelle felt her throat tighten. "I'll miss it too. The quiet, the safety, the feeling that Peter can just be a kid without me worrying about rent or food or whether we'll survive the month." "You could stay." The words hung in the air, impossible and tempting. "Victor, not romantically, not necessarily, but as," he struggled, "as residents. Peter thrives here. You're good at the work I've given you. This house is big enough for multiple people to have separate lives while being less isolated. You're offering us permanent sanctuary? I'm offering you choice, which I know I didn't give you at first. But now I'm asking, would staying be the worst thing or just the unexpected thing? Rochelle didn't answer immediately. She thought about her cramped apartment, the endless worry, the invisibility, then thought about this library, Peter's laughter at dinner, the strange domesticity they'd built in 10 days. Ask me again, she finally said, when the threat's gone, when leaving is actually possible, when staying would be a choice rather than necessity. Victor nodded slowly. That's fair. But Victor, Rochelle met his eyes. Thank you for asking, for making it a choice rather than an assumption. You've taught me that's important. Victor's expression softened. Choice, agency, respect. I forgot those were things people needed. You reminded me. They stayed in the library until nearly 3 a.m., talking about books and Kingston and what it meant to build a life from scratch. And Rochelle realized that somewhere between the violence and the domesticity, between fear and safety, she'd stopped seeing Victor Langford as a fortress. She'd started seeing him as a man trying to remember how to be human. And maybe she was helping him succeed. Chapter 8, January 15th, 9:23 a.m. Rochelle was reviewing logistics data when Cassia appeared in the library doorway, expression tight. Ms. Martin, Victor needs to see you. Now. The urgency in her tone made Rochelle's stomach drop. Peter is fine. He's with Dr. Amara in the classroom. This is about the investigation. Rochelle followed Cassia to Victor's private office, a room she hadn't been invited into before, all glass and steel, monitors covering one wall, showing data streams she couldn't decipher. Victor stood at the windows, phone to his ear, his voice cold and precise. I don't care about jurisdiction. The target is in international waters. We move in 30 minutes. He ended the call and turned. His expression was controlled, but Rochelle saw the tension in his jaw. We found him, Victor said simply. Found who? Matthias Keene, the man who tried to kill me 8 years ago, the man who orchestrated the New Year's attack. Victor pulled up a map on the central monitor. He's on a yacht off the coast of Gibraltar. My team is preparing to intercept. Rochelle's heart raced. When? Within the hour. Victor's eyes found hers. Once we have him, this ends. The network collapses. You're free. Free. The word should have brought relief. Instead, Rochelle felt something complicated twist in her chest. How do you know it'll work? She asked. Because Matthias was the architect. He pulled in remnants of the Trenton Syndicate, promised them access to my assets if they eliminated me. Without him, they have no coordination, no funding, no purpose. And you're sure he's there? This isn't a trap? Victor's expression flickered, something like respect. You're thinking tactically. I've been watching you for 2 weeks, I learned fast. It could be a trap. That's why I'm sending Zephyrin and Cassia with a 12-person team. Full extraction protocol. They'll have Matthias in custody within 6 hours. And if they don't, then I'll handle it personally. Victor's tone left no room for doubt. Rochelle moved closer to the monitors, watching the coordinates update in real time. What happens to him after you have him? Justice. Victor. Legal justice, Victor clarified. Arrest, prosecution, life imprisonment. I'm not the person I was 8 years ago. I don't need revenge. I need closure. Rochelle studied him, seeing the truth in his eyes. He'd changed. Being forced to protect her and Peter had cracked something open in him. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was rebuilding. When will you know? Rochelle asked. This afternoon, I'll update you as soon as I can. And if it works, if Matthias is captured, we can leave? Yes, Victor hesitated. Though my offer still stands, to stay, if you want to. Before Rochelle could respond, alarms pulsed through the house. Soft, controlled, but unmistakable. Victor was at the console instantly. What is it? Sir, Zephyr's voice crackled through the speakers. We have a situation at the south perimeter. Single individual, unarmed, requesting entry. Identification? Says his name is Elias Trenton. Says he wants to negotiate. Victor's expression went cold. Trenton, the family name from the disbanded syndicate. Should we engage? No. Bring him in, under full security. I want to hear what he has to say. Rochelle grabbed Victor's arm. Is this safe? No, but it's necessary. Victor looked at her. Go to Peter. Stay in your quarters. Don't come out until I send Cassia for you. Victor, please. His eyes held hers. I need to know you're both safe while I handle this. Rochelle wanted to argue, but the intensity in his gaze stopped her. She nodded and left, her heart hammering as she rushed back to find her son. 10:47 a.m. Elias Trenton was nothing like Rochelle expected. She watched on the monitors Victor had installed in her quarters, safety protocol he'd explained, as a thin man in his 60s was escorted into Victor's office. He looked academic rather than threatening. Wire-rimmed glasses, professorial sweater, hands that trembled slightly with age or nerves. Mr. Langford. Elias's voice was cultured, careful. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes. Victor stood behind his desk, flanked by security. Explain why I shouldn't have you arrested. Because I'm here to offer you something you want. The complete dismantling of the network that's targeted you. I'm already dismantling it. Are you? Elias pulled out a tablet, his own, not taken from him, and set it on the desk. You found Matthias Keene. Congratulations. But he's one node in a larger system. There are 12 other operatives you haven't identified, financial backers across 4 continents, political connections that make prosecution nearly impossible. Victor's expression didn't change, but Rochelle saw his shoulders tense. What are you offering? Victor asked. Names, locations, financial records, everything you need to end this permanently. Elias pushed the tablet forward. In exchange for immunity. For you. For my family. Elias's composure cracked slightly. The Trenton Syndicate was built by my grandfather, destroyed by your father. I spent 30 years rebuilding from the shadows. Not for revenge, for survival, but Matthias promised resurrection. He lied. Now my family is exposed and will be eliminated the moment you take him down. Unless I protect you. Yes. Elias met Victor's eyes. You understand what it means to be targeted by your family's history. Your father's enemies became yours. My grandfather's ambitions became mine. Neither of us chose this war, Mr. Langford. We inherited it. Victor was silent for a long moment. Rochelle watched him calculate, assess, decide. Show me the data, Victor finally said. Elias unlocked the tablet. Information flooded the screen. Names Rochelle didn't recognize, financial trails, photographs of people in expensive suits in government offices. This is comprehensive, Zephyrin observed. It's everything. Elias's voice was firm. Matthias built a network by promising access to your empire. These people believed him. Once they're exposed, they'll turn on each other. Self-preservation will do what violence cannot, collapse the system from within. Victor studied the screen. And you want what? Witness protection? Sanctuary. For me, my daughter, my grandson. We disappear. You provide resources to establish new identities. In return, I testify. I expose everyone. I end what my grandfather started. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only one offering you permanent solution. Elias's voice was steady. You can capture Matthias. You can eliminate operatives. But until the financial backers and political connections are exposed, they'll just recruit new people, new threats. Your fortress will always have enemies at the gates. Victor looked at Zephyrin. Verify the data. Already running verification, sir. Initial assessment suggests authenticity. How long? 3 hours for full analysis. Victor turned back to Elias. You'll wait here, under guard. If the data is legitimate, we'll discuss terms. If it's false, it's not. Elias's composure was unshakable. I'm staking my life on its accuracy and my family's safety. Then you'd better hope your confidence is justified. 2:34 p.m. Rochelle found Victor in the library, staring out the windows at the river. He hadn't changed clothes since the morning, looked exhausted. Peter's napping, she said. Dr. Amara said he did well today, finished a whole unit ahead of schedule. He's a smart kid. Victor didn't turn around. How's the verification going? 97% accurate so far. Elias Trenton gave us everything. Names we've been hunting for years. Financial structures we didn't know existed. Political corruption that makes my stomach turn. So his offer is legitimate. Yes, Victor finally turned. If I accept it, this ends. Not just the immediate threat, the entire legacy war. 30 years of my father's enemies targeting me, over, gone. Rochelle, I'd be free. Something in his voice made Rochelle move closer. But accepting means giving sanctuary to the family that spent decades trying to destroy mine. Means protecting people who've funded assassination attempts, corporate sabotage, violence that cost lives. Victor's jaw tightened. How do I justify that? By asking what serves justice better, revenge or resolution. Victor looked at her sharply. You're saying I should accept? I'm saying you're not the man you were 8 years ago. That man would have eliminated Elias the moment he walked through the door. But you didn't. You listened. You verified. You're trying to find the right answer, not just the efficient one. Rochelle met his eyes. That's growth, Victor. That's humanity. And if I'm wrong, if giving them sanctuary backfires, then you handle it. The way you've handled everything else. Strategically, carefully, but not cruelly. She moved closer. You taught me something these past 2 weeks. What? That survival doesn't mean becoming heartless. That protecting yourself doesn't require destroying everyone else. You've kept Peter and me safe without making us feel like prisoners. You've rebuilt your security without losing your humanity. Rochelle's voice softened. If you can do that, you can handle the Trentons too. Victor studied her for a long moment. You have remarkable faith in me. I have experience with you. There's a difference. Something shifted in Victor's expression. Gratitude, perhaps, or recognition. I'm going to accept Elias's offer. I think you should. And then I'm going to expose everyone he named, every financier, every corrupt official, every person who thought my father's war was worth continuing. I'm going to dismantle the entire structure. How long will that take? Weeks, maybe months. Victor's voice was steady. But once it's done, it's permanent. No more threats, no more inherited wars, just life, whatever that looks like. Rochelle felt her chest tighten. And what about us, Peter and me? Victor stepped closer, his presence less fortress and more human. That depends on you. My offer still stands. Stay. Build a life here. Peter can have stability, education, safety. You can have work that challenges you, resources that support you, and what? And someone who sees you. Victor's voice dropped. Who understands what it means to survive by being invisible. Who wants you to stop being invisible. Who? He paused. Who's learning that maybe houses need families, not just security systems? Rochelle's breath caught. Victor, I'm not asking for romance. Not immediately. Just possibility. The chance to see what this becomes when survival isn't the only goal. When protection becomes partnership. When fortress becomes home. Before Rochelle could respond, Peter's voice called from the hallway. Mama, can we have hot chocolate? The moment broke. Victor stepped back, composure sliding back into place. I'll tell Cassia to make some, he said quietly. Then meeting Rochelle's eyes one more time. Think about it. The offer, what you want, what Peter deserves. There's no wrong answer, Rochelle, just choices. He left, and Rochelle stood in the library, surrounded by books and possibility. Her heart racing with something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite hope. Something new. Something like a future. January 18th, 4:15 p.m. Cassia's voice crackled through the intercom. Ms. Martin, you'll want to see this. Rochelle left Peter with Dr. Amara and rushed to Victor's office. He stood at the monitors with Zephyrin, both wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. We have him, Zephyrin said simply. On screen, Matthias Keene sat in restraints, surrounded by international law enforcement. The yacht had been intercepted. The arrest made. It's over, Victor said, turning to Rochelle. Matthias is in custody. Elias's data is being processed by 7 different intelligence agencies. The financial backers are being exposed. The network is collapsing. So we're safe? Rochelle couldn't quite believe it. You're safe. Peter's safe. The threat is eliminated. Victor's voice carried something like wonder. It's actually over. Rochelle felt tears prick her eyes. Relief, exhaustion, the weight of 2 weeks finally lifting. We can go home. Victor's expression flickered. Yes, whenever you want. I'll arrange transportation, security until you're settled, financial support to rebuild. Victor, Rochelle stopped him. Can I tell you something? Of course. I don't want to go back to that apartment, to that life of invisible survival, of rationing food and worrying about rent and hoping Peter doesn't notice how hard things are. Her voice strengthened. I want something different, something better, for both of us. Then stay. Victor's voice was steady. Stay here, not as refugees or protected witnesses, as residents. Peter can continue his education. You can continue your work or find different work if you prefer. This house has space, resources, safety. And what do we give you in return? Purpose, Rasams. Victor's answer was immediate. I've spent 8 years in this fortress alone. You and Peter, you've shown me it doesn't have to be that way. That protection can coexist with connection. That security doesn't require isolation. He moved closer. You give me a reason to remember that houses are meant for living, not just surviving. Rochelle looked at him, really looked at him, saw not the billionaire fortress dweller, but the man who'd learned to play pretend with her son, who'd sourced authentic Jamaican food because comfort mattered, who'd listened to her negotiate terms with respect rather than dismissal. This isn't charity, she confirmed. This is opportunity. For all of us. Victor's voice was honest. I can't promise it'll be simple. We're strangers learning to share space. There will be complications, adjustments, probably arguments, but it's a chance, Rochelle finished, at something better than in survival. Yes, Rochelle thought about Peter thriving in Dr. Amara's lessons, about the library full of books, about hot chocolate by the fireplace and the feeling that someone actually saw her as human rather than a statistic. We'll stay, she said, with conditions. Name them. Peter's life stays as normal as possible. School, friends eventually, childhood that isn't defined by this fortress. You don't isolate him the way you isolated yourself. Agreed. I maintain independence, my own work, my own choices, my own space when I need it. Partnership means autonomy, not absorption. Agreed, Nish. And you, Rochelle met his eyes. You keep remembering that people matter more than security, that connection is worth the risk, that the walls you built kept you safe but also kept you lonely. Victor's expression softened. I don't think I could forget now. You and Peter made sure of that. Rochelle extended her hand. Then we have an agreement. Again. Victor took her hand, his grip warm and steady. Welcome home, Rochelle Bisham, for as long as you want it to be home. They stood in the office, hands clasped, while monitors showed the network collapsing in real time. The war ending, the fortress transforming. And Rochelle understood that sometimes the wrong address led to exactly the right place. Chapter 9, December 31st, 11:43 p.m. 1 year later. Snow fell past the glass walls of Victor Langford's riverfront home, slower than last year, gentler, like the world had learned to be less violent. Rochelle stood at the window, watching the city glow gold and distant, remembering another New Year's Eve when she'd stood in this exact spot holding a crimson-wrapped box in her son's hand. Mama, Victor says we can watch the fireworks from the rooftop. Peter's voice carried from the hallway, bright with excitement rather than fear. The rooftop has safety railings, Victor added, appearing behind Peter. He'd changed in a year, still precise, still controlled, but warmer somehow. His eyes crinkled when Peter spoke, and he smiled more easily. And it's enclosed, heated. I wouldn't suggest it if it wasn't safe. Because you're overprotective now, Rochelle teased. I prefer appropriately cautious. Victor's mouth quirked. There's a difference. Peter tugged Rochelle's hand. Please, Dr. Amara says watching fireworks is a cultural education experience. Dr. Amara also says you need to finish your history assignment, Rochelle countered. I did, all 20 pages. Ask Victor. He helped. Rochelle raised an eyebrow at Victor, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. He was struggling with the Industrial Revolution. I have expertise in industrial development. It seemed efficient. Efficient. Rochelle shook her head, smiling despite herself. You make everything sound like a business strategy. Some habits persist. Victor's expression softened. But I'm working on it. He was. In the year since Matthias Keene's arrest, Victor had been systematically rebuilding his life. Not just protecting it, actually living it. He'd reduced his work hours, delegated more, traveled less. He'd opened parts of the house Rochelle had never seen, a music room with a piano he'd forgotten he owned, a garden terrace where herbs grew year-round, spaces designed for living rather than securing. And he'd let people in, carefully, slowly, but genuinely. Zephyrin and Cassia now ate dinner with them twice a week, family meals rather than staff briefings. Dr. O'Mara had become more than Peter's tutor. She was a friend who discussed literature with Rochelle and debated philosophy with Victor. The fortress had become, gradually and impossibly, a home. 10 minutes to midnight, Cassia announced, appearing with champagne glasses and sparkling cider for Peter. Everyone to the rooftop, that's an order. Since when do you give orders in this house? Victor asked mildly. Since someone needs to make sure you actually celebrate instead of monitoring security feeds. Cassia handed him a glass. New year, new traditions, that's the rule. They climbed to the rooftop terrace, a space Victor had renovated specifically for this night. Heated enclosures, comfortable seating, panoramic views of the city. Peter pressed against the glass, counting down the minutes with visible impatience. Rochelle found herself standing beside Victor, both of them watching Peter rather than the skyline. He's happy, Victor said quietly. He is. You made that possible. We made it possible. Victor glanced at her. You rebuilt here, Rochelle. Created a life. You didn't just accept shelter, you transformed it into something neither of us expected. It was true, in the past year, Rochelle had moved from logistics analysis to operations management. She discovered she had a talent for systems thinking, for seeing patterns and optimizing processes. Victor had promoted her twice, not as charity, but because she'd earned it. She had her own office now, her own team, her own purpose beyond survival. She'd also applied for permanent residency, a process Victor's lawyers had made smoother, but that she'd completed on her own terms. She wasn't dependent on his protection anymore. She chose to stay because staying meant building something, not just hiding from something. Do you ever regret it? Victor asked suddenly. That night, the wrong address? Rochelle considered the question honestly. I regret the fear, the violence, the feeling of being used. But the outcome, she met his eyes. No, I don't regret where we ended up. Neither do I. Victor's voice carried weight. I thought I knew what safety meant. Walls, systems, control. But you taught me safety is something else entirely. What is it? Being known. Victor's answer was simple but profound. Being seen by people who choose to stay, not because they need to, but because they want to. That's safety, not isolation. Connection. Before Rochelle could respond, Peter shouted, 1 minute! It's 1 minute! They gathered at the glass. Peter, Rochelle, Victor, Cassia, Zephyrin, Dr. Amara. A strange family assembled by circumstance and trauma, held together by something stronger. Choice. 30 seconds. Rochelle thought about her cramped apartment. The endless cold, the delivery app that had vanished. The woman at the rail yard with dead eyes and expensive coat. The crimson box that had changed everything. 20 seconds. Victor's hand found hers, casual, comfortable, the gesture of someone who'd learned that touch didn't always signal danger. She squeezed back, acknowledging everything that contact represented, trust, partnership, the slow building of something neither of them could have predicted. 10, 9, 8, Peter counted loudly, making Zephyrin laugh and Cassia roll her eyes fondly. 7, 6, 5. The city prepared to explode with celebration. Millions of people turning toward a new year with hope, fear, determination. 4, 3, 2. Rochelle thought about the box, the key, the photograph with the red line. symbols of violence transformed over time into symbols of survival, of protection, of the moment everything changed. 1. Fireworks erupted across the river, color and light and sound. Peter pressed his face against the glass, mesmerized. Cassia raised her champagne in a silent toast. Dr. Amara smiled, serene. Zephyrin stood watchful but relaxed, security professional learning to be human. And Victor turned to Rochelle, still holding her hand, his expression carrying something she'd never seen from him a year ago. Contentment. "Happy New Year," he said. "Happy New Year," Rochelle replied. They stayed on the rooftop until Peter's excitement gave way to exhaustion, until fireworks faded and the city quieted, until the year officially turned and became something new. 1:27 a.m., January 1st. Peter was asleep in his room, no longer the guest bedroom, but genuinely his room, decorated with his drawings and books and the life he'd built. Rochelle stood in her own quarters, also no longer guest space but home, feeling the strange peace that came with safety. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Victor stood in the hallway, still dressed, holding something she recognized immediately. The crimson-wrapped box. "I thought you destroyed that," Rochelle said. "I kept it, as a reminder." Victor entered when she gestured permission. Of the night everything changed, of the mistake that became something else. He set the box on the table. Empty now, the threatening contents long since processed as evidence. Just red paper and a memory. "Why bring it tonight?" Rochelle asked. "Because a year ago you knocked on my door carrying this, thinking it was a gift, thinking you were just finishing a job." Victor looked at her, and it was a gift, not the way anyone intended, but still a gift. Of what? Purpose, humanity, the reminder that survival isn't the same as living. Victor's voice was steady. "You delivered something I didn't know I needed. The possibility that I could be more than a fortress, that protection could coexist with connection, that walls could come down without everything collapsing." Rochelle felt tears prick her eyes. "I just knocked on a door, Victor." "You did more than that." He moved closer. "You stayed when you could have run. You negotiated when you could have capitulated. You built a life here that transformed this house from a prison into a home. You gave Peter stability and gave me—" He trailed off, unusual for someone so precise with language. "Gave you what?" Rochelle prompted gently. "A family." Victor's voice was raw. "Not by blood, not by obligation, but by choice, by daily decision to stay, to engage, to care. You and Peter, you're my family now, and I didn't know how much I needed that until it was here." Rochelle crossed the distance between them, her hand finding his. "You're our family too, the complicated, overprotective, secretly soft-hearted version of family, but family nonetheless." Victor's other hand covered hers. "I have something to ask you, and I need you to hear it as a question, not an assumption or obligation." "Okay. This house, it's too big for one person. Too quiet, too much like a fortress and not enough like a home." Victor's gray eyes held hers. "I want to change that. Permanently. I want to legally establish shared residency, not guardianship. Peter doesn't need that. Not charity. You've proven you're an equal partner. But genuine legal acknowledgement that this is your home, yours and Peter's, for as long as you want it to." My Rochelle's breath caught. "You want to—" "I want to make official what's already true, that you belong here, that Peter belongs here, that this family we've built accidentally is worth making permanent." Victor squeezed her hand. "No pressure, no obligation, just an offer. Think about it. Take as long as you need." Rochelle looked at the crimson box on the table, thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, desperate, invisible, surviving day to day. Thought about the woman she'd become, employed, empowered, seen. Thought about Peter thriving, about Victor smiling more, about the strange, impossible family assembled from trauma and choice. "Yes," she said. Victor blinked. "You don't want to think about it." "I've been thinking about it for months. Every day Peter calls this home. Every time you remember to play with him before working. Every moment we build something together that's stronger than what any of us could build alone. Rochelle smiled through tears. So yes, make it official, make it permanent, make it real. Victor pulled her into an embrace, careful, gentle, but genuine. The kind of embrace that spoke of protection transformed into partnership, of fortress becoming home, of two people learning to trust after survival taught them to hide. Thank you, he whispered, for knocking on the wrong door, for staying, for teaching me that walls can be safety without being prison. Thank you, Rochelle replied, for opening it, for protecting us, for remembering that people matter more than security. They stood together, holding each other, while the year turned and the city slept and Peter dreamed in his room down the hall. And Rochelle understood, with crystalline clarity, that she hadn't delivered the wrong gift at New Year's Eve. She delivered exactly what was needed, a reminder that isolation wasn't safety, that humanity could survive alongside caution, that sometimes the most valuable thing you could give someone wasn't what they ordered, it was what they'd forgotten they needed. Hope, connection, family, the gifts that mattered most. Final scene, January 1st, 9:14 a.m. Morning light flooded the kitchen where Rochelle made breakfast. Ackee and saltfish again, because some traditions were worth keeping. Peter sat at the counter, drawing pictures of last night's fireworks with meticulous 6-year-old detail. Victor entered, hair still damp from a shower, looking more relaxed than Rochelle had ever seen him. Good morning, he said to both of them. Morning? Peter didn't look up from his drawing. Victor, do fireworks have names, like official names? Some do. The technical term for the colorful bursts is aerial shells. That's boring. I'm calling them sky flowers. Peter continued drawing. Mama, can we make sky flowers for your birthday? That's months away, baby. But we should plan. Victor says good planning prevents problems. Victor says a lot of things, Rochelle countered, smiling at Victor over Peter's head. Victor is very wise, Victor deadpanned. Peter giggled. Victor talks about himself funny. That's called third person. It's a linguistic choice. It's weird. Peter, Rochelle chided gently, be respectful. It is weird, Victor agreed, surprising them both. But some habits persist. I'm working on it. He sat at the counter, accepting the coffee Rochelle poured, and they fell into comfortable morning routine. Peter chattered about his plans for the day. Rochelle coordinated schedules. Victor listened, occasionally interjecting with suggestions or questions, his presence no longer fortress, but foundation. At some point, Cassia appeared with her usual efficiency. Morning briefing in 10 minutes, sir. And Peter, Dr. Amara sent over your reading list for next week. It's ambitious. I like ambitious, Peter declared. Of course you do. Cassia ruffled his hair, a gesture of genuine affection that would have been unthinkable a year ago. After breakfast, after Peter ran off to his lessons and Cassia departed for briefings, Rochelle and Victor stood together in the kitchen, washing dishes, the most mundane domestic task imaginable. This is nice, Victor said quietly. Dishes? Normalcy, routine, the comfortable boring of daily life. He smiled slightly. I spent 8 years avoiding exactly this, thinking it would make me vulnerable. Now I understand it's what makes life worth protecting. Rochelle bumped his shoulder gently. You've gone soft. Demonstrably. No defensiveness, just acceptance. I'm proud of you. Rochelle's voice was sincere. For choosing this, for letting us in, for remembering that fortresses aren't homes until people fill them. Victor set down the dish he was drying and turned to face her fully. I'm not good at this yet. At family, at connection, at remembering to be present instead of just protected. I'll make mistakes. I'll retreat into old patterns when stress hits. I'll probably overprotect Peter and overcomplicate simple things. I know. But I want to try, to keep trying, to be worth the faith you've placed in me. Rochelle cupped his face gently. Victor, you're already worth it. You proved that the moment you chose protection over elimination, the moment you gave us choice instead of captivity. Every day since, you've proven it again. You don't need to earn what you've already given. Victor's eyes were suspiciously bright. I don't know how to thank you properly for staying, for believing, for making this house feel like something other than a cage. You don't need to thank me, Rochelle smiled. You just need to keep remembering that people matter, that Peter deserves childhood, that families are built from daily choices, not perfect moments. Can you do that? Yes. Certainty. Absolute. Then we're good. They finished dishes in comfortable silence. Outside, snow began to fall again. Gentle, beautiful, no longer threatening. The city woke to its new year. Millions of people starting fresh, starting over, starting something. And in a glass house by the river, a family assembled by accident and sustained by choice began another year together. Rochelle looked at the crimson box sitting on the shelf now, no longer ominous, just a reminder. A symbol of the night everything divided and then, unexpectedly, came back together as something stronger. She hadn't knocked on the wrong door. She'd knocked on destiny's door, and it had opened to reveal not a fortress, but a home. Not a cage, but a future. Not the end of her story, but the beginning of their story. The gift she'd delivered hadn't been in the box at all. It had been in the knock itself, in the courage to keep trying when tired, in the love that made her bring Peter along, in the human need to complete what was started, even when instinct screamed to run. That was the real gift, humanity persisting despite everything designed to destroy it. And Victor Langford, billionaire fortress dweller, had finally learned to receive it. That's Rochelle's story, from wrong address to right home, from invisible to seen, from survival to family. If this touched you, subscribe to join our community. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far these stories travel. And click the next video on your screen for another story about unexpected doors and the lives they change. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing, like Rochelle did, that sometimes mistakes become miracles. See you in the next story.